Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Lettermen Live, presented by Wendy's. You see that little logo in the middle of your screen. You know what that means. It's Mick Walker. It's Spencer Holbrook. We're going to talk about Ohio State football. It is Lettermen Live, presented by Wendy's. And it's Thursday, so we've been doing this every Thursday for a long time. You guys know the drill by now. Mick, having a good Thursday? Doing all right?
So far, so good. I mean, it's only about 10 o'clock in the morning, so nothing could have really gone wrong or gone right too much so far. Going to be headed out
Okay.
to the Schottenstein Center tonight for the Ohio State basketball game, but other than that, we're just going through the day here, waiting for some more football stuff to happen. Luckily, we got some news last night that adds some fuel to the discussion this morning.
Yeah, we'll talk about that kind of stuff. First, I wanted to get into something real quick with you, Mick. There's a lot of discussion in our YouTube comments about our appearance. Like, just don't look at us then. If you don't like my appearance, don't look at me. Somebody said I'm wearing a wig. Like, this is my hair, guys. Somebody said that you look like you're high. I just think that that's like your natural appearance. Um, I wouldn't let him do the job if he wasn't sober. I wouldn't do the job if I had a wig on. Like, I just would be bald because at some point I will be bald. But in the meantime, I threw a hat on. I threw my robe back on. We'll talk about that later. But like, I don't know. There's just the last couple of weeks, we've got a lot of comments on our appearance. And you know what? I kind of appreciate it because it's making me want to be a better, more put together person and maybe bolster my appearance a little bit. What say you, Mick?
I think it makes sense. My wife and I were joking about the high comment because my eye thing and like the wideness of my eyes and how wide they open has always been a joke. Like there was a time during our lead up to our wedding where her grandmother said that I should smile with my eyes more wide open, like make them unnaturally more wide open, and I look like a maniac when I do it. So it's not anything I haven't heard. It's actually quite a funny bit, like that my wife got a kick out of. So overall, I mean, they make comments about our appearances, but everybody, just like they are in the Letterman Lounge for the most part, they're nice and cordial. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it's all in good faith and good fun.
And look, man, baldness skips a generation. My grandfather's bald. My dad is not. I know I'm going to be bald eventually. I've had a receding hairline since I was like 16. So, like, it's nothing new. I haven't heard before. But I wanted to wear my Rose Bowl hat anyway today. But it adds a little bit of fuel where, like, hey, I see that hat. And it's like, well, everybody's been telling me my hair looks bad. So I might as well wear a hat today. So, whatever. We don't talk about appearance. We don't talk about hair. We don't talk about eye wideness. We talk about Ohio State football, of course. But just a little fun to get the episode started. And it's all in good fun. I'm sure nobody would say that to my face, too. So, that's okay. Mick, let's talk about it because Ohio State hired three new behind the scenes staffers, not really behind the scenes, but kind of behind the scenes. Not one of the 10 assistants. It's not going to make those headlines, but it is going to send some shockwaves through the program because the Buckeyes went out and hired two offensive line assistants and potentially an offensive assistant, maybe working with tight ends. We're not really sure what that is. This is all reported, by the way. It's not, nothing's official, but also Ohio State won't make these kind of hires official. It's just kind of what happens in this sphere. So the Buckeyes hired offensive line coaches Marcus Johnson and Charlie Dickey. I'll get into their resumes in just a second. They also went out and hired, according to CBS Sports' Matt Zenitz, they hired Wendy Laurent. Laurent is a former Penn State offensive lineman who has been the associate head coach and tight ends coach at Dartmouth. Shout out to Lebanon, New Hampshire. Love Dartmouth. Beautiful campus. Great places to eat up there. Been to Dartmouth. One of my favorite places. That's aside from the fact, though, I might talk to Wendy Laurent about that a little bit. He was a former graduate assistant on the staff at Penn State in 2020 and 2021. A lot of Tyler Bowen, Joe Moorhead influence there from that. Well, not really Moorhead because he was gone by then, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like that entire tree there, Laurent is a little bit a part of that. Obviously, Bowen's going to be the offensive line coach, but then Marcus Johnson, a Mississippi native, former offensive lineman at Ole Miss, second-round pick in 2005, played for the Vikings, Raiders, Bucks, was the offensive line coach at Duke, started his career there, then went to Mississippi State as an offensive line coach in 2018 and 19, where he was an offensive line coach under
Joe Moorhead.
Yep. I think that all lines up. From there, he was the Missouri offensive line coach for 3 seasons. Then he became the Purdue offensive line coach under Ryan Walters for the last 2 seasons. You covered him at Purdue. We'll get some insight there. Meanwhile, Charlie Dickey started his career way back in 1990 before I was born, before my parents were married. Northern Arizona offensive line coach. He took the offensive line job at Arizona, was there for 10 years. Tight ends coach at Arizona in 2003. Washington offensive line coach in 2004, became the Utah offensive line coach for a few years, Kansas State's offensive line coach for 10 years, and then he went to Oklahoma State, where he was just relieved of his duties as the Oklahoma State offensive line coach. The bottom line is both Marcus Johnson and Charlie Dickey have a ton, and I mean a ton, of offensive line coaching experience between the two of them. So that's going to help Tyler Bowen, who hasn't been an offensive line coach since 2017, but is an elite recruiter. And then Wendy Loren, I think, is just going to help the offensive staff in general, probably with the tight ends with Keenan Bailey, since they just lost Sean Binks to the NFL. All of that's to say, Mick, I'm finally going to shut up and hand the reins to you because I want to hear more about Marcus Johnson. You know him pretty well. What does he bring to the offensive line room?
Yeah, we talked about it on the Lettermen Lounge message board, but he's going to have a guy in Marcus Bowe that's probably going to be a day 2 draft pick this year, going from Purdue, that played right tackle for the Boilermakers, which is very good for a Purdue program that just went 1-11 or 2-10. I can't remember the exact record. He's going to have that draft pick. He was the offensive line coach of Missouri previously. They just had an offensive lineman drafted last year, and they have a guy that's going to be a third-year junior getting drafted this year. So it's another guy he recruited. He's a really well-regarded recruiter. He works well in the South when it comes to just like Tennessee, Mississippi, which is where he's from. But he's also known as a great relationship guy. Like you mentioned, Joe Moorhead. I know Joe a little bit from covering his son. I texted Joe about both Wendy and Marcus, and he can't comment on it specifically at Ohio State, but he said both guys are great guys. He's always loved Marcus, and I got to obviously hired him there at Mississippi State. And obviously, you have to think that Marcus trusts Joe a good bit because he was an Ole Miss guy, went to go work at Mississippi State, so you cross over the Egg Bowl rivalry. And then Wendy is another guy that is really highly regarded. I did a story with Landon Tingwall, who's a former Penn State offensive lineman, to talk about Tyler Bowen a couple weeks ago, and Tyler Bowen was the coach that recruited him to Penn State. Wendy was actually an offensive line GA when Landon was there in Happy Valley, so he gave me some great insight on Wendy, which just once again verified that he was a great guy. I think there's a lot of expectations for what he can do as a coach, and obviously if Ohio State's hiring him, he's viewed as a pretty rising star in the industry if you're coming straight from Dartmouth to be somewhat of an off-field analyst or an assistant at Ohio State. So, and then the other thing with you look at Charlie Dickey, and somebody pointed this out to me last night, Kelvin Banks, who Ohio State played in the college football playoff, who's going to be a first-round left tackle pick out of Texas, was previously committed to Oklahoma State before he committed anywhere else. Charlie Dickey got him committed to the Cowboys, wasn't able to hold on to him. And then if you look at Marcus Johnson, he got Charles Cross, who was a former first-round pick at Mississippi State. He recruited and developed there in Starkville. So, I mean, these both guys have a good eye for talent, a good ability to develop. So it'll be interesting to see what they can bring and how they can help Tyler Bowen.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think that Charlie Dickey's a pretty good offensive line coach, a good offensive line mind. Just kind of from what I've seen, read, heard, like kind of one of those hard-nosed offensive line coaches, which I think you need when you've got a young guy and Tyler Bowen leading the charge, that face of the offensive line room, the lead recruiter for all of these guys. And then Charlie Dickey's going to be able to get his hands on these guys and kind of mold them in an offensive line mold along with Marcus Johnson. I think it's good that Johnson 43, Bowen I think is 39. Like those two are pretty young guys, and then Dickey's an older guy. So you've got a good mix there in that offensive line room, and I would expect this offensive line staff to be kind of complete. I don't think that they would add another offensive line coach because that would be, if there were 4 cooks in that offensive line kitchen, I think that'd be a little too many. I think you'd end up getting some paprika where you didn't want it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, around the kitchen. So I think that it's going to be good here. I really like this from Ryan Day. I think it's aggressive, but I think it's not too over aggressive, too hyper analyzing, you know, what Tyler Bowen's shortcomings might be, you know, surrounding him with 2 good, experienced offensive line coaches, one old, one young. I like it. I really like this hire, actually, both of them, because I think that it's just a good mix of everything you need in a modern offensive line room at a place like Ohio State to make sure that you're competing at the highest level. And, you know, if Luke Montgomery learned something from Charlie Dickey and Tegra Shabola learned something from Marcus Johnson and Austin Sarabeld learned something from Marcus Johnson, that's all additive. And I'm a big fan of these moves. And we'll see if they pan out because we quite actually never know if they're going to pan out. But good steps in the right direction for Ryan Day, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think another thing is just current recruiting. Marcus Johnson at Purdue was the first coach to ever offer Adam Guthrie, the 4-star offensive tackle from Miami Trace High School that Ohio State's recruiting now. So that prior relationship should help. I mean, obviously, Marcus Johnson can't get on the road, but he'll still be able to call, text, work from the phones. And whenever Adam Guthrie gets on campus, you can spend that time around him. And then Charlie Dickey, he was I was talking with Evan Goodwin, the 4-star offensive tackle out of Arkansas, who Ohio State offered on Monday. He was the first guy that Tyler Bowen's offered since like becoming a full-time assistant at Ohio State. And Evan actually knew Charlie Dickey prior to when his whole recruitment got started. I don't know if it was a family friend thing, but Charlie talked to him and kind of walked him through what the recruiting process would be like before he even got his first offer. And then Oklahoma State was his second offer. So I think you're going to have Charlie Dickey help with that. Evan Goodwin and kind of get him on campus, give him another reason to get up. And I imagine having Marcus Johnson here at Ohio State's going to give a little extra pull to Adam Guthrie. So that's current recruiting stuff that I think those two analysts will help with. I don't know much about what Wendy Laurent can bring to Ohio State as a recruiter, but most of these guys, if they're young, if they're getting hired by Ohio State, Ryan Day and the guys there in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center have to see something about him energy-wise, work ethic-wise to say, hey, we want this guy on our staff.
Mick, it seems like, and I want to talk about this pretty extensively on Friday, but just Cliff Notes version of this. Could they take like 7 offensive linemen in this class? Like, it seems like this could be like a ridiculously big offensive line class. You're going to lose Tigger Shaboul after this year. You're probably going to lose, you're going to lose Ethan Onyanwa. Who's to say what Philip Daniels could be, but he's a third-year guy. Carson Hinsman's going to be a redshirt junior, I believe. So, could he head to the NFL? Like, very possibly. If he has a really good year of starting, he would be a 2.5-year starter at center for Ohio State. You could lose quite a bit from this offensive line room, not to mention the attrition that you're going to have from the transfer portal just naturally. There's reason to believe, with an offer going out to Evan Goodwin, with Felix Ojo, like legitimately considering Ohio State, with Micah Champ-Smith legitimately looking at Ohio State as possibly the favorite there, with a couple of these other guys in the DMV or Virginia that Tyler Bowen is connecting with the possibility of Jackson Cantwell, with all of this in-state offensive line talent, even on down to like from Guthrie and Max Riley and Sam Greer all the way down to Mason Wilhelm. It seems like this could be like a 5, 6, or even 7-man offensive line class to like completely restock the room under a new offensive line coach. Do you think that sounds like at all possible, or do you think it's still going to be in that 3-4 range that we've come to know from Ohio State?
No, I think it has to be above 5, especially considering you only signed 3. You have to sign 2 or 3 extra just to make up for what you missed on the previous year. And I think we're going to have a story up and on later today. It's going to be free. Everybody can read it, and we're just going to be able to track, hey, here's all the guys that Lettermen Row's confirmed that Tyler Bowen has reached out to. And your guys are going to click on it, read it, and it's going to be a long list of names because he's reached out to probably over 20 guys. He's followed even more. He's checked in with coaches even more on some guys. So he's worked an expansive board. He's added names to it. He's established himself with some of the guys that Ohio State was already recruiting, like you said, a Sam Greer, even a Champ Smith outside the state of Ohio. So he's working to get a high number of guys, and I think that was always the gripe with Justin Frye, right? He's not recruiting a high enough number of guys to be able to. If you miss a guy or two, you're not going to be able to get the 4 or 5 that you need every cycle. It seems like Tyler Bowen's going out with a board of 15 to 20 and say, hey, if we miss on a handful of guys, we're still going to get our 5 or 6. And I think that's what Ryan Day wants, because he even acknowledged it at the National Signing Day press conference. Like, 5 is our number every year. We need to get that, and it hasn't happened the past 2 years. So I think that's going to be the goal, is for Tyler Bowen to come in and, like you said, land somewhere between 5 and 7 to say, we're overhauling this room and making sure we have plenty of talent. And it's like we've talked about previously. There's only so many people that are 6'5" and 300 plus pounds. So take as many of them as you can and let the chips fall where they may in a year or two when it comes to the time with Mick Mirati and getting on the field.
Well, I think that they're also not even like reaching on these guys. Like, they're all like top 300s. Like, it's not like they're like going out and like offering like way undervalued guys or guys that they've scouted that are the 1,000th player in the country that they think are better. Like, these are all like top level guys. And if you're talking 6 or 7 of them that could come in the class, like all top 300 to 600 guys, like that's a pretty good haul. So I'm curious about this. Last thing on this, Marcus Johnson, Mississippi native. There's a certain recruit in Mississippi, he's my favorite player in the class. I know he's not on that side of the ball, but I'm just curious. Maybe there's a conversation there of like, hey, I'm from Mississippi and I'm in the Midwest now. Why can't you be? So that's all.
I think there'll be a conversation. Whenever we all get to meet Marcus Johnson, whether that's in passing or an actual conversation, you'll get to know just how personable of a guy he is. So I would not be surprised if whether he knows Braylon Womack's head coach or if he knows Braylon Womack's assistant coaches or trainer or something. Like, there'll be ties there. And like you said, like even if we go back to the offensive line thing, I think the thing that you have to look at is, yes, they're recruiting the top 300 guys, but also we had a story earlier this week about a gentleman named Oliver Moore out of Cherry Creek High School in Colorado, who's 6'6", 280 pounds. And like, he only has a handful of G5 and or like lower Power 5 Big 12 offers, but he's got all the traits. Like, we're going to have a story here later today on about a guy that's scheduled to visit, and Aaron Thomas out of Desert Mountain High School in Phoenix, Arizona. His dad played at Florida State, was a multi-year starter for the Seminoles. He's 6'6", 280 pounds. Like, these guys that are lower ranked too, we're going to get tackle bodies. We're going to get big guys and hope we can kind of strike oil on them, hit big on them. So I think that's another thing you have to be is encouraged by, is just taking chances on traits there for Ohio State.
I like it. I think it's a good direction for this offensive line room. 2 offensive line assistants, potentially another offensive assistant, Wendy Laurent. Good stuff from Ryan Day. I like these hires, man. And it seems like he made the interesting hires on the actual assistants, but the guys he's surrounding them with make you think that he had a plan all along. I know it's crazy, but Ryan Day, the $12 million man, had a plan for all of this, guys. Like, it wasn't like he was just going, oh, I wonder if Tyler Bowen can coach the offensive line. We may never find out until it's too late and it's bad. No, like, he went out and got offensive line coaches to surround Tyler Bowen with so he can coach the offensive line and he can recruit while the other 2 are also coaching the offensive line. Again, good hires here. I called it a home run on the Lettermen Lounge message board. Maybe dialed that back to a triple just because I want to see if it actually cleared the wall. But, and we'll know that over time, whether it did. But so far, so good, man. I really like what Ryan Day's doing this offseason and bringing some young infusions of talent while also adding some veterans. Because he's a national champion and he knows what he's doing on the hiring spree. If you look at the calendar right now, Mick, what is today? It is Thursday, February what?
20th.
We have officially known a national champion, Ohio State, for 1 month. So we're going to talk about that because Ohio State won the national championship a month ago. Like, can you believe that? It was just like, I actually can't. It's crazy how fast time has flown. I just remember being down in Atlanta for that because it was awesome. It was a great moment. It was a great experience. Both you and I were down there. And finally, the wait was over. Ohio State is the national champion. You knew where I was going with this. Ohio State clinched the national championship, and now you can own a piece of the historic victory, the new limited edition 2025 Ohio State CFP football, the exact ball the Buckeyes used throughout the college football playoff and the national championship game. It is handcrafted, customized. The football has Nike's distinctive gray fractal swoosh and outlined in scarlet, the iconic 2025 CFP logo, and then look at that. The Block O on there, the official 2025 emblem and the Block O together. They go together like peanut butter and jelly because Ohio State's won 2 of these bad boys now. Go to biggameusa.com/Buckeyes. Snag yours before they're gone. Own it for yourself. It's a perfect gift for you or the other Ohio State fanatic in your life. Ohio State football is more than a game. It's a way of life. But you can own this football right now at biggameusa.com/Buckeyes. That's biggameusa.com/Buckeyes. From what I heard, a lot of Ohio State fans are buying these footballs. I do not blame you at all. This thing is so cool. I play with it throughout the house. My wife gets mad at me. My cat's afraid of it because I throw it around a little bit, but that's okay because I love carrying that football around. I'm going to get a case for it and eventually put it away. I'm not going to take it out and throw it in the mud and everything, but you can do whatever you want with it. It's the official Ohio State football, the College Football Playoff 2025 Nike football from biggameusa.com/Buckeyes. Go there right now. Get your hands on one of those footballs today. Mick, we're going to do a little look back now. We got about 30 minutes left in the show, maybe 45, depending on how long we go. We're going to do a little look back. Because it's been a month, man, and that's crazy. Ryan Day said there's stories to tell on this team. You only get to tell them if you win. Well, guess what? They won. So we're going to tell some of these stories, but we're going to first do a look back on the 2025 national championship game. It's been 1 month. You've slept on it for a full moon cycle. I think, right? Is a moon cycle 30 days?
Roughly.
I don't know. I'm not a stargazer, so I'm not a moon gazer, I guess, either. I don't know. When you think back to the 2025 national championship game, Mick, Ohio State beating Notre Dame 34-23, what is the one defining moment for you that you can't get out of your head still from that game?
I mean, it's lowest hanging of all fruit, but it has to be the 3rd and 11, 3rd and Jeremiah, whatever you want to call it, being on the sidelines. I was at a horrible angle for it. I was actually kind of at the angle of linear to where the line of scrimmage was, so I kind of got to watch it on the field, but also watch it on the screen. I didn't get a great shot of it happening at all, but just being on the field, kind of watching that happen, it's one of those things that, like, in 20 years when they're running college football playoff commercials or college football commercials, it's going to still be on there because it's Jeremiah Smith, and it's what he did as a freshman was crazy, and that was kind of the pinnacle moment of it all. So I think that has to be the easiest one to take. But so I'll leave you with some of the tougher choices.
Yeah, man, I think so. 3rd and Jeremiah is so iconic for so many Ohio State fans because they watch the whole game on their TV with their families. They're probably jumping up and down, hugging their kids. Like, Ohio State's clinched a national championship. It's just amazing. For me, I tried to get down on the field with 4 minutes to go. I had my story written. I thought Ohio State was going to win by a few scores because they were up 34 to, 31-15. So I decided to head down. My story was already written. All we had to do was put the final score in and hit publish. Well, they wouldn't let me on the field. So I had to go in the photo bunker under the stadium, which nobody cares. I'm not complaining. I was at the national championship game. I understand my privilege. But I watched the entire thing in person. And then the last 3.5 minutes, I had to watch on a TV in the photo well. So I had no clue, what was going on out there in person because I had to, like everyone else, watch it on TV. And so 3rd and Jeremiah is so iconic. But for me, it was like that was a moment that I saw on TV. It wasn't a moment that I saw in person. So for me, the lasting impression of this game was absolutely the middle eight because Notre Dame, I think, had outscored opponents. I think it was like 148-15 or something or 16 in the middle eight this season. And Ohio State went 14-0 in the middle eight, thanks to Quinshon Judkins. Will Howard throwing that touchdown pass to him across his body over the middle, which is the throw that you don't want to make unless he's that wide open. Will Howard throws a touchdown pass to Quinshon in the final minute of the second quarter. And then I think this is going to sound weird, but I think the moment that will forever stick in my head is Ryan Day was so confident that they were going to win that game that Quinshon has a 73-yard run to open the second half. And with like 14 minutes to go in the third quarter, Ryan Day burns a timeout just so he can let Quinshon Judkins catch his breath so he can finish that drive off with a touchdown run. And like to me, I think I looked at Patrick Angles from Buckeye Sports Bulletin, and because he was sitting right beside me, and I looked at Tim May, our dear friend Tim May, and I said, he just took a timeout with 14 minutes to go in the third quarter of the national championship game just so Quinshon can catch his breath. And I've never seen that confidence just like radiate off of Ryan Day. Like in that moment, he absolutely knew. Like there was nothing that was going to happen where they were going to lose that game. And ultimately, like Notre Dame put some pressure on them and made them think twice maybe about that and all of that. And we know how it ended. But that timeout to me, where it was like timeout Ohio State, I was like, what? He said, why did he take a timeout? It was like, oh, he knows they're going to win. So much so that he's like, let's take this timeout. Quinshon can catch his breath, and then we'll let him score this touchdown. To me, the confidence that he showed there is such an underrated moment that, and I did request to sit down with Ryan. I hope to talk to him here in the next couple of weeks when he gets back into the city. I really want to ask him about that moment because I just want to know, like, was that supreme confidence? Was it a different thing? Like, that just sticks out so much to me as like an underrated moment of the national championship game a month later where I think about it pretty often. Like, man, if you would tell Ryan Day, the guy who was standing on the field with his hands on his hips while Jack Sawyer is screaming after the Michigan game where Ryan Day's saying, what happened? If you were to tell him like, hey, you're going to take a timeout so early in the second half of the national championship game just to let a guy catch his breath and score a touchdown, like he would probably be like, no, there's no way. There's no way. I just think that that's so cool of a moment that nobody talks about.
Yeah, I think another one that's really under the radar and it didn't register for anything because Notre Dame went on to have like a 19-play, 10-minute drive to open the game. But I think it was the first snap of the game. JT Tuimoloau kind of knifing in the backfield, getting the TFL and hitting this celebration like he did all playoff. Him like I got a good picture of that, and then them winning, him having that play. And I think if you really talk about it, I think we just talked about the two guys that, in my opinion, probably should have won the offensive and defensive MVP. All respected Cody and Will. but I think JT and Quinshon probably should have had those awards. That's just kind of my opinion. But then to have that picture, to have that moment, I caught up with JT a couple of days later at the Canes event they did, which is now the reason why they have all the Jack Sawyer and Will Howard Canes commercials. But JT and I were just sitting there, and I go, "Hey, Mike, thanks for doing all the celebrations after you get TFLs or sacks. It makes for great pictures." And he goes, "Oh, did you get a picture?" And we got to go. I showed him the picture. We got to kind of go through it. So it was a cool interaction. So that's one that'll stick out with me. One that I'll never forget because it didn't happen was before the Quinshon Judkins touchdown right before the second half. We didn't get our chance at a Jeremiah Smith fade ball that Ohio State had queued up, that they had wanted, drawn right up, and it was snapped off the line. It looked like they wanted to run it, and all of a sudden, I think Ryan Day took a timeout, or I believe, or somebody took a timeout, and we never got the fade. But I remember me and a couple of the other Ohio State photographers we were asking for, because those fade balls, you get a nice picture coming. So it was right here in this corner end zone. We said, "Hey, can we get a fade ball here?" And they queued it up. We knew it was coming, and they didn't get it. So those two plays, the one that didn't happen and the one that did happen, but then was ensued by a 10-minute drive, are a couple others that kind of will stick out with me forever, I imagine. And I'll tell my kids and grandkids about when the time comes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just cool, like, to think about some little moments that, like, we talk so much about that game, man. Like, there's, like, go through our YouTube archives, go to lettermenrow.com, read all of that. There is so much that we talked about with this game. And yet here we are a month later, like, oh yeah, that happened. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. And, like, the doink, like Notre Dame electing to kick a field goal there when they really shouldn't have, if we're just being honest with each other. Like, there was no reason for them to kick that field goal, and it doinks off. And we just didn't talk about the doink because of 3rd and Jeremiah, and then Jaden Fielding making that field goal. And, I've talked about this quite a few times now, but the special teams being so imperative in that game, Notre Dame faking the punt that Ohio State stopped on kind of a bad throw, but still Ohio State got the stop there. And, I had a staffer come up to me before the game, said they're going to fake something. And they were prepared for it. Ohio State was prepared for it. I don't think 2023 Ohio State would have been that prepared for something like that. For Jaden Fielding to make that field goal. And then, I saw him on the field after the game, and he said, I told you when they needed me, I would be ready. And he was ready against Oregon. He was really good, in that game. He was ready against Notre Dame. They didn't need him against Texas. But he told me after the Texas game, like, it's the weirdest thing, but, like, I hope that Jaden's okay with me sharing this because, we get to tell these stories now that they've won the national championship. It's like Jaden came up to me after the Texas game and said, I wanted Texas to score a touchdown there to tie the game. Then I said, why? And he said, because Texas didn't offer me. He's like, I'm from Texas. Texas didn't want me. He's like, I wanted to hit a game-winning field goal against Texas. And, like, again, if you went back to the Michigan game and told Jaden Fielding, like, hey, this is what you're going to tell me after the Cotton Bowl win. It's like, I wish that I would have been on the field in a tie game to win it. He would have, like, probably tried to kill me. So, like, all of these stories that we finally get to tell, it's just so cool. I love being able to just sit here and kind of reminisce on it. We're going to continue to do that. But first, I got to tell you, Mick, needed some lunch the other day. My wife working in the flower shop. And Valentine's Day, very busy there. So I had to go out and grab some lunch for her and for myself. And, of course, I had $7 in my wallet. Do you know what that means, Mick? I got 2 faves for $7 at Wendy's. 2 faves for $7. It's got to be Wendy's. Of course, terms apply. But you want a spicy chicken sandwich and 10 chicken nuggets? 2 for $7. Crazy. You want a regular chicken sandwich? You want a Wendy's Dave single and 10 chicken nuggets? 2 for $7. Then you just add a little bit of fries. You add a drink. I like the strawberry lemonade there at Wendy's. It's a little bit more, but you get 2 faves for $7. 2 faves for $7. It's got to be Wendy's. Terms apply, of course. Now we move into it, Mick. We're going to continue on with the month after recap of the national championship game with a dynamic duo presented by Wendy's. Of course, Dave Single and 10 Chicken Nuggets is my favorite dynamic duo at Wendy's, but a dynamic duo at Ohio State that I think will never get the proper recognition because one of these guys was an absolute superstar and one of them was an underrated, unheralded star. Ty Hamilton and Tyleik Williams. TNT is what they called themselves. Ty doesn't get near as much credit as he deserves for his entire career. I remember at the 2020 Clemson game, Ty Hamilton was on the field. Like, that's how long he was around. Like, he was around forever. And he was a freshman playing a little bit, in that freshman season. 2021, he played it even more. He just kept getting better as the years went on. And I think Tyleek is going to have a really good NFL career. Tyleek had a really good Ohio State career, starting with that, I think, 3 sacks against Tulsa or whatever, his true freshman season. He had a good big play in the 2022 Penn State game as a sophomore. Like, you could see that. He was a star. And he talked about it a lot. And we like Tyleek. But, man, like, what a good defensive tackle pairing. And in a world where the Texas defensive tackles get all the credit and the Georgia group from a couple years ago gets a ton of credit for their national championship run, and obviously Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant get so much credit at Michigan, and they are both going to be first-round picks, so I understand why. I think that Ty and Tyleek, looking back at the college ball playoff run where Ty and Tyleek were just throwing Texas offensive linemen to the side and destroying the Oregon offensive line that was so good all year, and then, holding their own against a really good Notre Dame unit. Both of those guys deserve so much credit. I think they're the most underrated dynamic duo of this entire CFP run that we witnessed a month ago.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it before. Spencer told me who his dynamic duo for this Wendy's awesome 2 for 7 segment would be. I threw out a couple ideas. I said John Furlman and Jaden Fielding. John Furlman, the awesome long snapper, had a great year. Jaden Fielding made a ton of great kicks. But I'm going to go with 2 guys that were not season-long starters, not guys that were known commodities. I'm going to go into the trenches flip side, and I'll take Carson Hinsman as center and Luke Montgomery at left guard. What those guys did when they came in, how they played, I think it really – there's a great picture I have, and we'll get it out sometime, of Carson Hinsman when they celebrated the sneak that they got in the national championship. He was first guy up onto the pile, given the first down signal. There's been the clip circulating recently of Luke Montgomery on the twist pickup that Notre Dame tried to run on that 3rd down to Brandon Ennis. Like, those guys I think they brought a certain level of energy, effort, and attitude to the Ohio State offensive line when they got into the lineup. So I think it was unmatched by anything else they had that season. All respect to Seth McLaughlin, but I think Carson Hinsman brought something a little different. It might have been something Ohio State needed. So I'll give it to those 2 guys for my dynamic duo, what they were able to do at left guard and center. And obviously they'll be back this year to be able to continue that dynamic duo in the middle of Ohio State's offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they prove themselves again this spring and Tyler Bowen puts them in the starting lineup, I think you're going to see those guys for a lot of snaps next year. It's interesting to me, though, Mick, because like you said that Hinsman brought a little something extra. He is so like emoted and animated on the field when something good happens. And I think that first started to come out in his first start. They play, or maybe his second start. It was his first. It was his first start.
Yeah.
Because when Donovan Jackson moved up the left tackle against Penn State and Carson Hinsman's inserted there, that final 5 minutes and 13 seconds, a drive that probably won't go down in Ohio State history anymore because of all of the CFP moments. But they don't even make the CFP if they don't beat Penn State, because then they end up losing to Michigan. And I think the Michigan loss makes us forget about the Penn State game. But like that 5-minute drive, every time they got a first down, Carson Hinsman is just going nuts on the field. If you haven't watched that 5-minute drive in a while, go back and watch it, but only watch 56 and 75. Seth McLaughlin at center, Carson Hinsman at left guard. Those 2 are going nuts the entire time on that drive. And they're paving the way. They're the catalyst for that entire thing. They are putting their head down and they are destroying Penn State's defensive line and linebackers. And all along the way, after every play, they're letting Penn State know about it. They're signaling first down. And then there's that iconic photo that should be remembered very fondly of Justin Fry singing Carmen, Ohio, and his arms are around Seth McLaughlin and Carson Hinsman. And that is just such a great photo because the way they handled Penn State, when it mattered the most. And I think as the playoff run went, you saw Hinsman tap back into that animation, that emotion of just being so hyped when something good happened. And I love seeing that. I think that that's a great call for you. And I think that those 2, Montgomery being an Ohio guy, Hinsman knowing full well what it means to be a Buckeye at this point in his 4th year coming up, I think they're going to be 2 like true leaders for that offensive line. So not only is that a good dynamic duo from a month ago, but it's a good one to remember for the future as we get closer and closer to spring ball. Like those 2 are going to be huge for this team, in a leadership role come the spring.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about Carson is I think he's unique uniquely Carson Hinzman. Like nobody's going to change him from being who he is, but I think that's a great thing for Ohio State to have in the middle. I think this past year he matured a lot being behind Seth McLaughlin. I think he's kind of rounded into the ultimate form of what Ohio State needs out of him. So I'm interested to see how he plays this year with hopefully some experienced guards around him and some new transfer tackles that should play really well with the entire offensive line unit under the tutelage of, like we said, Tyler Bowen, Charlie Dickey, Marcus Johnson, like a whole unit of guys that should be able to help that interior offensive line group go. And you and I could go on and on, like just naming pairings. You know, we talked about it. Like you said, you mentioned JT and Jack. That's an obvious one. That not really underrated. That's kind of the known commodity. The running backs, Quinshawn and Trey. The wide receivers, whether that's you can add Jeremiah Smith with one or the other. It's a Jeremiah Smith +1, whoever you would like to add in that one. And you go on and on and on. Cornerback duos, Lathan Ransom, Caleb Downs, a safety. It was a special team, and I think that's why a month later we're still talking about how special it was.
Two more things for you. Carson Hinzman gave me just an insane quote after the national championship game. He's standing in the locker room. He's smoking a cigar. Absolutely loved this moment. He's just puffing away at this thing, and every 2 minutes he would puff smoke out, and it would hit me directly in the face. Like, oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. And I was like, it's okay. Like, there's cigar smoke everywhere. We can't escape it. But he kept apologizing, which shout out to him, very nice guy. I started coughing a little bit during the interview. It was funny. I do like a good cigar, by the way. I didn't get to smoke one, though, because I didn't win the national championship. I just covered the thing. But one of the quotes he gave me was, I just had to go out there and do my job. Wisconsin cream rises to the top, and that's what happened today. And I was it's just such a perfect Carson Hinzman quote. You're not, again, and, he's a dairy farmer. He's from Wisconsin. That is such a good quote. And, the alternate universe of Greg Studrawa leaving Ohio State and Justin Fry coming in and Carson Hinzman flipping to Wisconsin is just such a crazy, alternate reality that almost happened. It could have happened. And now he's just talking about being a Buckeye, but also, understanding what Wisconsin tough means. And that pairing together, maybe that's the dynamic duo. The Ohio State culture with being a dairy farmer from Wisconsin just makes Carson Hinzman just so good. The other dynamic duo that I just want to shout out while we're reliving some of this month after stuff, don't discount the dynamic duo of Will Howard and Devin Brown. And it's another thing I want to talk about with Ryan Day is the culture of the program is so strong. And I love the culture that Ohio State has built here. But the culture of the quarterback room, I think, needs to be discussed a little bit more. Devin Brown had absolutely no reason to stick around for the national championship game or the Cotton Bowl or the Rose Bowl or even the Tennessee game. And he said, you know what, I'm going to do it. And before every game, Will Howard and Devin Brown would have their headphones on. They would go in the locker room. Immediately, they would go out to the field and they would take a lap around the field just to check out the field. That's what they do. Both of them would be talking, smiling. The entire crowd is just serenading Will Howard, yelling at him, cheering him on as he comes into the stadium. And not a lot of people said anything to Devin, but Devin still wore a smile. He still cheered for Will. After the championship game, he's wearing the T-shirt. He's happy for everybody. He's embracing teammates. And, the culture of that quarterback room, if it goes through still to next year with Lincoln Keenholz and Tavian St. Clair and Julian Sayin, and maybe if they add a fourth, it is so strong that I have confidence that, whoever loses the quarterback battle in the spring and in the fall is going to still be there, cheering these guys on, because that's what this quarterback room is. And, Devin Brown and Will Howard, I think, formed a pretty good relationship there through this past season. Something that maybe I'll ask Will about next week at the Combine, just his relationship with Devin. And I just think that that's a duo that will never get talked about. But when Ohio State needed Devin, he threw a touchdown pass at Michigan State. When Ohio State needed Will, time and time again, he delivered. And I just think that that's something that should be talked about a little more, is that pairing of those two quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I think this might be the only time ever that people in Columbus, Ohio root for a guy that's wearing blue and yellow. But I think there'll be a lot of Devin Brown, Cal Bear fans in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center in the Columbus area next season rooting for his success. And we wrap
There should be.
And if we'll wrap it up on one dynamic duo, we talked about some coaching staff ones before the show. Sadly, a lot of those pairings have kind of fallen by the wayside with some of the movement. But the one duo that I think is still here and needs represented a little bit is Rob Keys and Gunnar Daniel, the special teams coaches that kind of run the ship there for the specialist units. those guys kind of knew coming into the game that everybody was like, oh, Ohio State has the edge on offense and defense, but Notre Dame might have an edge on special teams. And whatever Notre Dame tried to do on special teams was null and void because Ohio State was ready for all of it. So hat tip to those guys a month later on what they were able to do with the special teams unit as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. The last dynamic duo that I'm going to talk about is a little personal to me. It's something that I hold near and dear to my heart, quite literally. It's myself and Roback. I'm not even doing my ad read for Roback because I'm going to do that tomorrow because, I love Roback, so I just talk about it on every show now. And we have a code, Lettermen20. Use the code Lettermen20 at Roback.com, RHOBACK.com/Lettermen20. You'll notice I'm not wearing a hood today because usually I'm wearing my Roback hoodies. You see the logo and everything. This has a logo somewhere on it. Oh, it's down here. It's down here on like the hip. It's the standard dog logo. Maybe you can see it. I don't know. Yeah, there it is. But anyway, yeah, this is great video. But anyway, it's not a hood. And guess what? It's still ridiculously comfortable. No, they don't just sell hoodies. They don't just sell those performance hoodies. They've got these long sleeve. They've got real hoodies that are like built for, the cold and February cold in Ohio. They've got shorts. They've got performance polos. They've got Ohio State gear. Go get your stuff right now at roback.com/Lettermen20, RHOBACK.com/Lettermen20. It is my favorite dynamic duo. It's myself and Roback. Don't tell my wife. But we're going to get out of here on that. Mick Walker on the other side of your screen. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Go to Wendy's. 2 for $7. It's got to be Wendy's. Pick 2 of your favorites for $7 at Wendy's right now. Terms apply, of course. That is Mick Walker on the other side of your screen. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching the latest Lettermen Live presented by Wendy's. Go get your Big Game USA football, biggameusa.com/Buckeyes. It was super fun. Got to talk a little bit more about the national championship Ohio State Buckeyes a month in review because we've had a month to digest all of this now. Talk a little bit about those national championship Buckeyes. Talked about all of those new hires that the Buckeyes are making. Again, Mick over there. I'm Spencer. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys back at LettermenRow.com. $1 a week, every week for an entire year at LettermenRow.com.